So in the first video, we walked through setting up the UI controls for this application that collects input from the user. In this video, we're going to walk through the steps of working in the C# code to hook up our submit button and gather that information from those controls. So starting with our UI view, you can double click on the submit button, and that will take you right into your C# application code. You can see we're in our main page, XAML.cs, and here is the submit button click event. Now, the click event fires when that submit button is clicked. So everything you want to have happen when that button's clicked needs to go inside of this method. So what is it we need to do? Well, the first step is going to be to get the first name from that user control that we placed, and we named it user name, right? And that's why we gave it a name, so we could reference it over here in the code. So we'll start by creating a string variable named name, and we're going to equal that to the username control dot text property. Now, if you're familiar with creating Windows Forms applications in C#, you're going to notice this is the exact same procedure that we would use if this was a Windows Form application. And the reasoning behind this is that Microsoft wanted to make it very easy for developers that already understood how to write C# applications, or maybe even write Visual Basic applications, to get into making apps for phones and for the Windows Store. So you're not going to find a lot of difference in how your applications have to go together. So I'm just going to make a couple of little comments here so we know what we're doing. So this is gathering the name from the text box control. And so we're also going to need to get gathering the date of birth from the date picker control. So in order to get the information from the date picker control, we actually need to gather a variable of type date time offset. And I'm going to call this current date. And that's going to equal our date picker dot date. And then we need to break this out into individual month, day, and year so that we can do our calculation and determine the user's age. So our int day is going to be the current date dot day. Our int month is going to be the current date dot month, and then our int year is going to be our current date dot year. So now we have the individual pieces. We need to write the method that's actually going to determine how old the user is. And so I'm going to go ahead and write this method down here outside of the submit button. And this is going to be public int, what should we call it? Calculate age. And it's going to take in that int day, that int month, and that int year. And so this is where we'll do our calculation for determining how old the user is. So I'm going to set up a variable to hold the age. If I could type, not in caps, there we go. And we're also going to need to get today's date so that we know what is today's date, and we can calculate from there. So we can do date time. I'll put today's date is equal to a date time dot now. And that will always return today's date. Right, and so this is just an if-else situation to determine a couple of things. So first, we need to know, let's go ahead and talk while we type here. If our month that they were born is greater than today's date month, then we know that if that's true, if that's greater, then their birth date has probably already passed, right? And so we don't want to make them older than they already are. Or we're going to need some extra parentheses here to make sure that this logic is right. Or our date of birth month equals today's date month, which means this is their birth month. And we need to check if their birth date has happened yet. So we need to look at the date as well. So the day they were born, if that is greater than, oops, or equal to today's date dot day. Right? If any of this is true, then their birthday's already passed. And so we can't just take today's year, the current year minus their date of birth year, because that's going to make them a year older than they are. So we need to subtract one. So our age is going to equal our year that they were born minus, or I'm sorry, the current year, today's date dot year, minus the year they were born, minus 1. So if that's not true, we don't have to subtract the 1, right? And so then it's just today's date dot year minus the year they were born. And so then at the end, our method needs to return the age, because we said we were returning an int, so we have to return an int. And so up here, when we call this method, when we call calculate age and pass it in the day, the month, and the year, it's going to return the age of the user. All right, and so now what we want to do is actually create a little statement that says, hello, whatever they said their name is, you are how many ever years old. So I'm going to go ahead and create this string so that it's formatted out the way that I want. So this is going to be my string message. It's going to equal, and I'm going to do a string.format so I can do string replacement. So I'm going to say, hello, name, you are age, years old. Right? And with string replacement, remember we can just add these in to the comma separated list at the end. So now our string message is what we ultimately want to display. So there's a couple of different ways that you can display information in a Windows Phone app. The first way I want to show you is to actually display it here on the screen like through a control. So let's add a text block right here under our date picker and come over to our properties, and we're going to name this output. Just name it output. That's good. Don't put any text in it. Take out that word text block and let's make it a little bigger. Now it's not going to show up on the UI, and when you run this in the emulator, it's not going to look like there's anything here until we take this string and put it in there. So display the message string in the output control, right? So it'd be output dot text is going to be equal to our message. So go ahead and build that and make sure that you don't have any errors and that it runs. And I think I lost a parenthesis somewhere. I did. That's better. One more. Yes, 3 at the end. There we go. So yeah, there we go. Got all my parentheses straightened out there. So make sure it builds and that you don't have any errors. And go ahead and fire up your emulator and take a look at what this app is currently doing. Okay, so here's our application. We can type in our name and we can come here and pick, and I can just use my finger. That's what I'm doing on my touch screen right here. I'm just using my finger to scroll through some of these and just pick a date right there. And then when we click the check, we can see that our date picker goes ahead and accepts that information. And then when you click submit, there's our concatenated string, hello, whatever they put in the name box. You are, in this case, born in 1977, 37 years old. That's not my date of birth, but I just picked something arbitrary. But this shows that our concatenated string is in fact working, and we can check our calculate age and make sure that we are getting the right date of birth. So at this point, if your app works like it should, builds, and you can check your math and make sure that you're actually computing the correct year, you are finished with our input and output demonstration. However, I have one more little video to wrap up this lesson talking about message box pop-ups and a little bit about the asynchronous messaging system in Windows Phone applications. So stick around for the next video where I add on a little bit to this program and start showing you some different ways that you can display information on Windows Phone.